Coming up on the show tonight, part 2 of 5 of my draft positional rankings for the Seahawks. Not the 5 best players at each position, but the 5 players that I believe are attainable for the Seahawks, that I like and I see as fits for John Schneider, Mike Macdonald, and the Seattle Seahawks. Part 2 of looking at the trenches, the defensive tackles, and the offensive tackles tonight. Buckle up. Let's go. This is Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Another big shout out to Doer, built for doing lifestyle apparel for every occasion. Flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles, but you don't need to go there. You can do everything you want right here on shopdoer.com, and that is spelled D-U-E-R. This is my favorite clothing company. Everything that they make is with sustainably sourced materials. It's also breathable and antibacterial, if that's important to you. And these right here are my daily superstars, my go-tos. These stretch performance jeans, 20% stretch. They move with you. They're versatile. They're light. They're comfortable. But they're also tough. They're built for doing. You can do anything in these pants. The most difficult errand, you can work on your car, you can work in the yard, but you can just lounge around the house in them as well. And check out all their other apparel too. It's all of the highest quality. And right now you can get 20% off your first order by going to shopdoer.com/forever. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/forever for 20% off your first order. All right, you guys, welcome back. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that bell for notification of future episodes. All the other ways that you can support the channel are listed and linked down below in the description. Little bit of news today before we get to the defensive tackle and offensive tackle rankings in this draft. They wrapped up the owners' meetings today. Mike Macdonald and John Schneider both down there. Macdonald spoke to the media today. The big news out of there were some of the rules changes that were adopted and one that wasn't, at least not yet. They have decided to table for the time being the proposal to ban the tush push. There was plenty of debate, some of it very spirited, reportedly, and they're not close to a consensus on either side of this thing. But they didn't vote on it, so they didn't approve it, they didn't reject it. They may revisit it again in May, and that thing still may get passed in time for the season. Tush push still not out of the woods yet, but they did adopt a couple of new rules changes. First of all, the down and distance markers now, while the human chain gang will still be there as backups, they're going to use the laser technology. They experimented with it last year in the preseason. The UFL has been using it for a couple of years now, and my goodness, it appears to be very, very advanced technology, sometimes getting down to an inch, and it's really, really quick. I think it's going to help the game. One of the other rules that was adopted today is they made the new kickoff format permanent, but they changed the penalty for a touchback or kicking it out of the end zone to the 35 rather than the 30. So some of those teams that just decided last year, the analytics told them, kick it out of the end zone, let's not risk a run back. Now we'll see if that fulfills the intention the league had originally, which was to bring the kickoff return back into the game, and if it'll encourage more teams to bring the ball out. The other one that was approved today, finally, mercifully, thank goodness, the overtime playoff rule has now been moved to the regular season. Both teams now in overtime during the regular season are going to have a chance to possess the ball. So even if the team that wins the toss marches down and scores a touchdown, the other team will get a chance to match. That has been a long time coming. I thought it was ridiculous when they changed the rule in the first place that they didn't just go all the way and do this originally. It makes no sense to me. And I think it's going to lend itself. Maybe it doesn't happen this year. Maybe it takes a year or two. But at some point, we're going to get an overtime in the regular season that's going to be epic, where the first team scores a touchdown, the second team matches it, it goes back and forth. I think that was a long time coming, and that was really smart. They also passed a couple other new unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. There's some new gestures and things that they wanted to weed out of the game, and so some of that was done as well. Other than that, the big news story of the day today, courtesy of Brady Henderson of ESPN, who does such a remarkable job of covering the Seahawks, getting some sourced reporting going back over the last couple of years and some additional clarity on the history with DK Metcalf and the Seattle Seahawks now, and that before the Seahawks accommodated his trade request and moved him to the Pittsburgh Steelers a few weeks ago for a second-round pick, it wasn't the first time he'd asked for a trade. In fact, Brady says that it had happened several times over the last few years. Speculation immediately went to, did he ask for a trade after Russell Wilson was traded? Did he ask to be traded after Pete Carroll was fired? And so, I think my initial takeaway from that was, as much as there's a lot of fans out there who were frustrated with DK because of some of his on-field antics, some of his outbursts on the sidelines, some of the flags and unsportsmanlike penalties that he would get on the field, knowing now that over the last couple of years he wanted out, I think that just speaks to what a pro he actually is, because it wasn't like he didn't pout, he didn't make a big deal out of it, he didn't go leak it to the press or anything. No one knew about this until today, but he still kept clocking in, doing his work every day, and not just like keeping his mouth shut and biding his own time, but he was a leader in that wide receiver room too. So as if I didn't have enough respect for DK Metcalf already, have even more for him now. Really hope it works out for him in Pittsburgh. And now, the signs continue to grow that it'll be Aaron Rodgers throwing the football to him in Pittsburgh. That should be wrapped up soon. I guess Aaron just needs a little bit more of the spotlight on him, wants to drag it out as soon as he can. But they're working out together. They're throwing together. The owner, Art Rooney of the Steelers, spoke on it yesterday, said that he thinks it's progressing. It's going to happen in due time. So that'll be interesting to see, because one thing that Aaron Rodgers does that I think Gino was a little bit better at doing this than Russ was, you don't have to be wide open for him to throw you the football. He's going to give DK Metcalf plenty of opportunities to win some contested catches. And that's an area of his game that's been debated over the last few years, that for all of his size, athletic ability, that he hasn't been great in 50-50 balls, going up high pointing balls, winning contested catches. He's going to get many, many opportunities to do that in Pittsburgh. That's going to be fun to watch, and I hope it works out for DK, and I hope it works out for the Seahawks, and they go draft an awesome wide receiver in this draft, and Cooper Kupp is healthy and productive, and JSN takes the next step, and everybody wins. But we're not going to talk about wide receivers or skill position today. We are finishing up our trench work. Yesterday, we looked at interior offensive linemen and edge players on defense. And again, a reminder that the way I do my rankings here is it's not the 5 best players. So for instance, yesterday in the edge rankings, you're not going to see Abdul Carter on my list, because the Seahawks have no shot at Abdul Carter. Now, if they go and prove me wrong and they trade up to the number 2 or 3 pick and they get Abdul Carter, cool, I'll celebrate it. We'll talk about it on the show. I'll react to it. And then I'll tip my cap and say, well, I guess I was wrong. He was attainable. It's not very reasonable or rational. And then I try to focus on fits and players I like, not necessarily what the consensus is or what anyone else thinks. They have to be scheme fits, and they have to exhibit qualities that I think the Seahawks would be attracted to, and also qualities, of course, that I'm attracted to. So let's get into it, shall we? And we're going to start with the defensive linemen, because I want to finish up with the offensive tackles before we put the offensive line to bed. So these are my top 5 with an honorable mention. And number 1, if you've watched the show before, you know this, it's Kenneth Grant. And up until the last few days, if you watched my show last night or at some point today, you'll know why I've changed my opinion a little bit. Not going to give that away here. Going to make you go watch that episode. But Kenneth Grant has, and still from a pure volume standpoint, up until this point, he's the guy that I have mocked the most often at 18 to the Seahawks. 6'3.5", 331 pounds, 2 years running on the Bruce Feldman's freak list. That's the kind of athlete that he is. Power, brute force, violence, speed, explosion, quickness. His biggest weakness, diagnosing, reading plays, the instinctive stuff, but he's still raw. He's still just 21 years old. So for all of the older prospects in this draft, and many of the rest, in fact, most of the rest of the names on this list our older prospects, not Kenneth Grant, just 21 years old, won't turn 22 until midway through the season. And what's really, really exciting to me about Kenneth Grant is this guy, you look at it and you go, okay, 6'4", 330 pounds. He's a nose tackle. Well, yeah, he can play the zero technique, the one technique, but he's not just. He's so explosive and quick. There's so much pass rush upside there. His motor always runs hot. He sells out. Like he goes 100% on every play. And there's not going to be the intimate familiarity there with Mike Macdonald. He got there a year after Macdonald's 1 year as DC in Michigan. But you have Jay Harbaugh. There's certainly the connections there to get all the intel that they want to get on Grant. But everything about him, he just walks and talks. You know, if he looks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, you know, he walks and talks like a Seahawk. And I just think the upside there, I think he's going to contribute as a rookie. He's going to give you a ton just off his ability. But I think he's got all pro upside and potential. And you start to dream on putting that combination of him and Byron Murphy together. That's pretty exciting. And it works, even though you see on some of the consensus draft boards that he's in that 25 to 32 range, the back half of the first round. I'm not really buying that. And there's a chance he goes before 18. But if he's on the board at 18, he's going to have a really good grade from the Seahawks. I'm confident in that. Is it going to be the highest grade on their board? Don't know. They do incorporate need into their grade. So even when they say best player available in the first round, no matter what, there is need factored in. The reason I like Kenneth Grant also at 18, other than I just like the player, is I like how the draft falls after that if you go defensive line first. I think even though there's a lot of depth at the defensive tackle position, I think Daniel Jeremiah said he's got 24 starter grades on defensive tackles this year. That's about twice as many as normal. That's how deep this class is. The drop-off is pretty significant after the first 3 or 4 guys as far as that sky's the limit upside. You have a bunch of nice like rotational players that can help you later on. There's some guys on day 3 that are more traditional nose tackle that are just going to clog lanes and kind of, you know, bust some gaps and take on blocks, although there's 2 of those on this list as well. But Grant, I just see him next to Byron Murphy. You're talking about, you know, being right there. We saw the impact last year with the LA Rams, even though Jared versus an edge player, like the Jared versus Braden Fisk combination. I think a very similar result could come out of having Byron Murphy and Kenneth Grant playing side by side. The upside is immense. Number 2 on the list is Darius Alexander. Now, this is one of those older players because of the COVID years and NIL and everything else. Although he spent his entire career at Toledo, he'll be 25 in August. So he is an older player. He's going to be 29 years old by the end of his rookie contract, unless he's a first-round pick, in which case you'd have a chance for the 5th-year option. You could keep him into his year 30. 6'4", 305 pounds, 34-inch arms, a 9.16 relative athletic score, a 4.98 40-yard dash, 9 sacks in 58 games. That doesn't really pop off the page, but 55 hurries over the last 2 seasons. And he dominated at the Senior Bowl in the one-on-ones, in the team drills, in the game. He was a force. And he was a guy, frankly, he's one of those guys that I wasn't that familiar with before I went to Mobile. Came away liking him, obviously enough to put him number 2 on this list. Now, his skill set's a little more similar to Byron Murphy. So he's not going to be that nose tackle that a lot of us want. But, you know, the way Mike Macdonald likes to mix and match, and he says, you know, I mentioned this last night, he says, we don't have a cookie cutter defensive template. Like you can be any size, shape, style, we'll make it work as long as you have talent. I think he'd find a way to figure out how to use Byron Murphy and Darius Alexander. Number 3, Alfred Collins. I think I called him Albert before. He is that nose tackle. Obviously, Byron Murphy knows him well. We could reunite him. He's not quite his ex-teammate, Tavondre Sweat, but he's pretty close. 6'5 and a half, 332 pounds. This is a massive man. He's a little bit older too, 23 and a half, but he's got 64 games of experience, 141 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 7 sacks along the way. This is your nose tackle. This is a guy that eats up blocks, occupies blockers, shoots gaps and fills them up. He can two gap and presumably would be a guy that really can free up Byron Murphy to be more of a 3 technique and try to penetrate, get to the quarterback a little bit more than he did as a rookie, maybe not be double teamed quite as much. Ty Robinson is another guy out of Nebraska that's, again, older, just turned 24, 6 years with the Cornhuskers, 60 games under his belt. He just kept getting better every year and really jumped off the page for me at the Senior Bowl, or jumped off the tape, and got to see him, in person, up close, and every day the effort level was consistent. This guy's all about motor. 6'5", 288, the 24th best defensive tackle relative athletic score since 1987, a 9.89. Just 12 career sacks, but 7 of those in 2024 to go along with 13 tackles for loss. Kind of felt like a breakout year for him as far as getting to the quarterback. And you see the effort. It's undeniable. And this is also a guy that you can move all the way up and down the line of scrimmage. I think as much as any, although Alexander fits that bill as well, and Grant, like you can play Kenneth Grant at 5 technique. Darius Alexander, you can even see, and you saw in that clip, that he'll play out in some wide 9. Ty Robinson can play like that defensive end, basically, but also can reduce inside. And he's just a guy that's going to bring his lunch pail to work every day and give you great, great effort. Tyleik Williams, just another one of those guys out of that national championship team at Ohio State. So much to like for those guys over there. Now, he's played at 335-ish before, weighed in at 327 at the combine. With on his 6'3" frame. This guy, he's a little younger. He's got 51 games under his belt, but he's still just 22 years old. Very productive, 136 tackles, 28 tackles for loss, 11 and a half sacks. McDonald would have seen him. He was a freshman, and he did play and contribute as a freshman at Ohio State. So McDonald, at least from across the sideline, would have seen him. And also, he's played with JSN. He's played with Tyreek Smith, who's on the practice squad, so those guys would be familiar with him as well. He's another one of those guys that would be your traditional nose tackle, but he's got a little bit of juice that hasn't been tapped into, I think, as a pass rusher. And then J.J. Pegues, yet another one of those guys from Ole Miss. They got he's one of 4 defensive linemen that are going to be drafted off of that team. 6'2", 325, kind of a bowling ball type. Kind of reminiscent. Some of his reps, he reminds me a little bit of Rocky Bernard, if you remember him. Not quite Brandon Mebane, but more Rocky Bernard. I'm going to stick with that comp. And he has an interesting background. He originally went to Auburn as a tight end. He was a 4-star tight end recruit. Wasn't quite 325 at the time. And then played there for 2 years. They began the conversion to defensive line. Then he transferred to Ole Miss. His first 2 seasons, he had 24 hurries as a defensive tackle. Last year alone, he had 24 hurries. So it really seemed like the position change really kind of clicked last season. But what makes him so exciting, and the reason he's on this list, I'm going to put this up just so you can see the whole list again, is he's also played some fullback, and that's where this gets really exciting. And even at his pro day, they announced him, even though he did all the defensive tackle drills, like he's still going to get drafted, I think, by a team that wants him to play some defensive tackle, because he's a legit prospect at that position, even if he didn't do the fullback stuff. But they announced him as an offensive weapon. I thought that was funny. 21 carries, 69 yards, doesn't sound like a lot, but ran for 7 touchdowns. And you see the reps, like sometimes they would snap it directly to him. They were really creative with it. They would line Jackson Dart and J.J. Pegues and then a running back like right next to each other, side by side. Like they would both be on Dart's hips. And you didn't know if they were going to snap it to Dart. He would hand it to one of them. they threw it to him a couple times, or if they would snap it directly to Pegues. But he, for a guy in Clint Kubiak who wants to use a fullback, it says they're going to have one on the roster and has a history of using one. There are some interesting prospects in this draft that play other positions and can contribute full-time at other positions. We'll get to some of those in some of the lists that are coming up. Pegues is the most intriguing of those, though, because he can give you a rotational productive player at defensive tackle as well as be a short yardage fullback as well. Really, really exciting. All right, let's talk about offensive line before we put this to bed, right? This is what everyone wants to talk about. And this one, there's a couple of things that have attracted me to certain players in this offensive tackle class. First of all, you have to look like a guy that can thrive in an outside zone scheme. So you got to be able to get out and move. You don't have to be an elite athlete. Like Abe Lucas gets out there well enough when he's healthy, and he's not exactly like the smoothest. Well, when he's healthy, I would qualify him as a smooth mover, but he's not the most explosive, dynamic mover, right? To use a couple of my favorite words. But I look for guys with a nasty streak, and I look for guys that I think can either play both sides, so the team has a young swing tackle moving forward. That role is going to be held by Josh Jones this year. But a guy that, can give you potential upside moving forward at right tackle or left tackle, so that in the event that Charles Cross gets injured, you got a guy that can play some legitimate left tackle and you can win some games with. But also a guy as insurance in case you get to the end of next season, and even if Abe Lucas goes out and he's healthy all year and he plays well, they may not feel comfortable, especially if Lucas does stay healthy and play well and earns himself a good contract. They may not be in a position to want to pay both of those guys and give them big extensions at the same time. Now they could stagger it, right? They could just, and I think they will. I think it's by May that they have to do the decide if they're going to pick up 5th-year extensions. They will on Charles Cross, so they could just let him play on his extension and extend Lucas first. But in the event they don't want to, or they're not comfortable with that knee long term, or knock on press board, he gets hurt again, or he's just never the same. And I'm optimistic that he will be. I thought he really finished out the year strong last year. You could see him get in better football shape again. You could see him get a little stronger. There was no limp. He wasn't wearing a brace. And now, he talked after the season about how good he felt. The first time in 2 years he's been healthy. And now you see the workout videos this offseason. He's able to attack the offseason 100%, which he hasn't been able to do in a while. That's encouraging. And I feel good about that. But maybe it just doesn't make sense from a business standpoint to re-sign he and Cross at the same time, especially if you go out and you acquire maybe a veteran guard or, let's not go there yet. But a guy that can play right tackle, legit right tackle. And that's why this player is number one on my list. And again, this has nothing to do with where I think they'll be drafted, obviously, because Chase, there we go. Chase Lunt out of Connecticut is someone that is widely projected to be a 4th rounder. Maybe he gets into the 3rd round. If you're the Seahawks and you really like him and you're worried about a team jumping up in front of you, maybe you take him at 92, for example, right? But if you haven't seen anything from Chase Lunt yet or heard about him, go seek out his video. I don't have any all-22 tape. Connecticut, just the database I subscribe to, they just don't have any Connecticut offensive line tape. But just go on Twitter, type in Chase Lunt, and you'll see some cut-ups. This guy is ferocious. 6'8", 305. He was another tight end recruit. He was a 2-star tight end recruit. And then he made himself into an offensive tackle. Obviously changed his body, became a 3-year starter. That 2023 Connecticut offensive line finished in the top 10 in the country in sacks allowed. They only allowed an average of 1 sack a game. Now, what was interesting about that in 2023 is he's playing right tackle. Guess who his right guard is? Yeah, Christian Haynes. And those two played really, really well together. You go watch some of that tape and you can see why Christian Haynes was the 81st pick. And those guys side by side, watching Lunt get to the second level and destroy blockers or as a blocker in the run game, pretty remarkable. But he's a good pass blocker too. PFF gives him a grade of 73.9 as a pass blocker compared to 87.1, which is an elite grade from them as a run blocker. He has played some guard. He's played one snap at guard. I don't see him as a guard. I think if you draft him in the third or fourth round, he's not contributing as a rookie unless something goes terribly wrong, again, with Abe Lucas. I think you're drafting him. He's going to push Michael Jarrell and maybe push Michael Jarrell off the roster because I think he has more upside. And he could be your right tackle of the future. So that was my only hesitation with him. I don't know that he can play the left side. But he's so good at what he does. And I think the ceiling's so high that I went ahead and put him at the top of my list. He's the most fun of all of these guys. Number 2 for me, Ariante Ursery out of Minnesota. Massive dude, 6'6", 330. Played left tackle for the Golden Gophers, but to me, he looks more like a right tackle. He just has that build, and he does struggle with some quickness and speed on the edge. Saw that at the Senior Bowl. You can see it on tape. But I do think, having that left tackle, 3 years of starting experience at left tackle is great experience to have. Again, if he becomes your right tackle at some point and you need him to switch over and play left for a while, he can get you out of a couple of games. I think he can survive there. I think he'd be an upgrade over what we saw from Stone Forsythe, certainly. But I think he's a guy that long-term, similar to Lunt, would be a guy that you would think would be the hedge against Lucas, potentially as a long-term right tackle. And there are some who also feel like he could project inside to guard as well. And surprisingly, at 6'6", 330, the reason I have him on this list, he moves well enough, and most scouts believe that he could play, that he's scheme versatile, that he could play in an outside zone, and actually they did some of that at Minnesota. Really consistent performer, really, really solid in both the run and the pass game. Ozzie Trapillo, 6'8", 316, big dude out of Boston College. Better pass blocker than a run blocker right now at this point in his career, but he's good enough as a run blocker, and you can see that there's more to be had there. And he did start games at left tackle and right tackle at BC. One of the things I like about him, he would be that guy that, could push Josh Jones for swing tackle and then, take that role next year, but potentially also, again, if they move on from Abe Lucas, a guy that could play at right tackle for you. Logan Brown's another guy out of Kansas that I liked. Looked really good the week of the Senior Bowl, 6'6", 315. He's a natural fit in the outside zone. He has played left tackle and right tackle. He's played one game at guard as well, so in a pinch, he might be able to factor in there also. 0 sacks in the last 2 seasons for him at Kansas. Only 2 quarterback hits and 8 hurries allowed. Excellent work from him at Kansas. Jalen Travis, I'm close on. Of all these players, and really, I should have flipped these 2 around because I have them as a tie, but I have Jalen Travis with a little bit bigger font. I actually like Jack Nelson better. I think he's a little bit more athletic, 6'7", 316 out of Wisconsin. He's played 49 games. I think he's a better fit in zone. In a pure zone scheme, he could play either side because he's not. They list him at 316. He played at 305 actually during the season at Wisconsin. I think he moves a little bit better than Jalen Travis, and he can play either side. I don't know that he has that long-term, I don't know that he's as well positioned as the other guys on my list to maybe take over for Lucas, be a long-term starting right tackle, because I don't know that he's powerful enough to do that, but he's good enough in all facets of the game that he could be that swing tackle for you and potentially work his way into a starter. Whereas Travis, bigger dude, 6'7", 339, massive wingspan, 35-inch arms. The thing that really attracts me to him, he does move surprisingly well enough to be able to get out and pull and get out in outside zone runs. He originally went to Princeton, and then he transferred to Iowa State. This guy he is an award-winning leader and community activist. Does that not scream Seahawks to you, right? I think it's an important position, and I think it's getting overlooked a little bit in some of the discussion and some of these mock drafts, because the assumption is that, well, so much of the focus is on what's happening inside, guards and center. We did hear John Schneider yesterday say that they're not that high on this center class, which I found interesting. Does that indicate that maybe they see Zabel as a guard, not a center? Or maybe just not a pure center? I also think it speaks to, because, John always likes to say they grade for their roster, not for the rest of the league. I think it speaks to, how much they like Olu Oluwatimi and Jalen Sundell, and they're on the record as saying that they do, and that the staff, this new staff, really likes them. So I think the focus has been so much on guards that maybe tackle's gotten overlooked. Certainly they don't need a left tackle, right? I kind of shudder at all these mock drafts that have Josh Simmons falling to 18, which I don't think he will, and being taken by the Seahawks. To me, he's more of a finesse left tackle, very similar to Charles Cross in some ways. I don't see him being that mauler that you want on the right side, and I don't see him as a guy that would be a better fit at guard than some of the other players that they could take in that spot. But I do think that it's a sneaky need, maybe even not that sneaky, because of the Lucas situation. You just can't count on him. And I'll say it again, even if he goes out and has a great year, plays all 17 games, and looks like rookie Abe Lucas, well, then he's going to be in line to get paid $15, $16 million a year. The Seahawks can handle that with their cap situation for the next couple of years. And maybe if they're young enough, if they don't go out and trade for like a Wyatt Teller, for example, someone who would be in line for an extension of their own, and a very high-priced veteran, if you're going young inside, you can afford to extend Lucas if you feel confident in that knee and Cross. Get your bookends locked up, then you don't have to worry about paying any big money to any of the interior guys for a couple of years because they're on rookie contracts. Might be a decent way to kind of manage some of that salary cap, especially given the fact that you've moved on from 2 big wide receiver contracts. JSN's going to be eligible for an extension next year, but you don't have to extend him early because he has the 5th-year option available as well. So lots of flexibility. They absolutely could sign Lucas and Cross long-term, but in the event they don't, I think you got to draft a tackle, and I like the idea at minimum of taking one of these guys that can play either side. I'm not so sure Michael Jarrell can play the left side. I just don't think he can deal with outside quickness as much. I like the athletic upside of Jarrell, but I think he's a guy on this roster that's really vulnerable. If they were to draft a guy like this, like, he's going to be in a battle to make the roster. So we'll see how that works out. What do you think of my rankings? Who did I miss? Tell me who you think I missed. Put it down in the comments below, and we can debate it. I'll tell you the reasons why I didn't put them on my list. Always love talking about this stuff. You should know that about me by now. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, and all of the ways you can support the show are linked down below in the discussion. Join me again tomorrow for part 3 of 5 of my Seahawks positional draft rankings, as we now are in April. We're in draft month, you guys. 23 days left until the first round of the draft, which I will be live streaming. We'll do watch parties day 1 and 2 because they have so many picks. So look forward to that. That'll be here before you know it. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks.